This meeting shall be called to order. I will now call the June 22nd, 2022 regular Historic Preservation Committee meeting to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and all 5 members are in attendance, with Member Turner calling via phone. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Member Houts just told me, and Glenn is absent, so for the public record, then Glenn is absent. Glenn Fine, yes? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you need to talk in your mics.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then we'll continue. Public comment. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda item. Members of the public may participate in the meeting without being physically present by one of the following methods. Written comments may be submitted via the public comment form. To comment during the meeting, members of the public may call 702-589-9629 when the public comment period is open, and it is now open.
Public comment.
Hi, I was wanting to speak for just a couple of minutes about a situation in Boulder City that pertains to the historic preservation.
Yeah. Is it a agenda item?
No, I was told just to call in.
Yeah, we will have an opportunity at the end of the meeting where you can call in on any subject. The beginning public comment period is just for matters related to the agenda.
Okay, I'll be waiting, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll wait just another minute, see if there's any more public comment. Okay, hearing no more public comment, then we will proceed. Agenda item number 1, for possible action, approval of the minutes of the May 25th, 2022 regular meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. For possible action, discussion with Northwind Resource Consulting, LLC, on potential changes to the adopted exterior design guidelines for various properties in the historic district.
Madam Chair, our representative Courtney Mooney with Northwind is currently not present. I've reached out to see if she's going to be able to make the meeting or not. So what I would suggest is to move forward with the agenda, and we can always come back to item 2.
Okay, all right, very good. Then that's what we will do, since she's not right here right this minute. Then we're moving on to agenda item 3. For possible action, recommendation to the City Council regarding a draft policy for the placement of monuments on city property within the historic district.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Mays for the record. City Council has asked for Historic Preservation Committee feedback on a draft monument policy. This policy has been developed in response to inquiries about the erection of statues and other monuments within city parks. And so in your packet, starting on page 23, is the draft public monument administrative directives. And so we'd be looking for committee feedback that we could take back to the city council.
Okay. All right, do we have any feedback on this? Are you hearing me okay, Holly?
Yeah, I'm asking.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You want to start, Blair? You want me to start? Whatever.
I'll go ahead and start. Thanks for giving a try on this. I had some questions and some suggestions. My first question is in regards to the purpose, or I'm not sure where it would fit, but your definition of monument refers to monuments, memorials, which can be displayed as plaques, work of art, and other fixtures. So what I'm saying is monuments and memorials are kind of two separate things. You memorialize somebody or you monumentize somebody, so to speak. But anyway, I thought maybe you should perhaps define if you are only dealing with non-living memorials or monuments, because what about other living types of monuments or memorials, such as trees? You see people, or at least I've seen around here, trees planted in memory of. So I would suggest adding something about that. And also, are these permanent or temporary monuments or memorials? Because you also bring up works of art, quote unquote. And there's a heck of a lot of artwork in town that the city helped, I guess, the Nevada Humanities for the Art, maybe? I can't remember. Install those, but I think because they're on city property, there's some relationship there with that. I'm not sure. And those aren't memorials, or monuments, they're art, and I guess I would want to figure out what's the difference between a work of art and a monument or a memorial. Is it an artistic memorial or an artistic monument? Or it's a monument that's artistic versus a work of art, such as a sculpture that's on a pedestal in town, or that's currently in town.
Member Davenport, just to clarify, so as I read the administrative directive, they're specifically focusing on monuments, including works of art, that commemorate an individual, a group, or an event. So as I read this, it would not be inclusive of just artwork that's not commemorating any of those.
Okay. Then, as far as the policy, or I don't know, again, where this would fit in, but the allowing of the placement of the monument, no matter who it's sponsored by, it states that it's compatible with existing uses, do not adversely impact the use of public spaces, and do not create liability or monetary demands. And I wasn't sure if it would be possible to add, or if it's an impact to the historic district or the features that are important to the historic district. And I'm not sure, I don't think that would, I mean, I don't know if city code could address that, current historic preservation code or not, but.
Member Davenport, what item number were you referring to?
I put it in policy, under number 2, or that's where I was wondering if that's where you could, I suggest adding, determine if it's appropriate, compatible with the historic district, or the features that make the historic district listed on the National Register. I'm not sure how to word that. I can wordsmith that if that would help later, but the other question I had, and this is again under policy, is what's the city code that allows this? And I know you talk about that city code is, it will be reviewed for compliance with city code, but what is the code that allows the installation of monuments?
I think the intent with the administrative directive is to ensure that it is inclusive of all provisions of the city code, either known or unknown at this point. I can tell you specifically one area that is impacted is the building code. So erecting these monuments would need to adhere to the building code requirements.
Okay. As well as, I guess, height restrictions, if there's, I don't know if there's a code for height restrictions in certain areas for housing or other buildings, but what about for parks? Noise, I don't know, all those other, for instance, somebody wants to put on a whirly gig or a windmill, let's say, and what's the noise level maybe associated with that? I don't know, or some other light fixture or...
And I think the intent, so we may be implementing additional regulations in the future, and so this would be inclusive of that by stating it has to comply with the city code.
Right.
So it would apply to all regulations existing and future.
Okay. And then the only other thing that I thought was I would really like to see a definition for significance. Significant to who, what, by whom, for what. I don't know what that means, significant. And then also like citywide versus less than citywide versus citywide significance. I don't understand what that means.
Where were you reading now?
It's
Blair?
everywhere. Like, so number 6, monuments of less than citywide significance. What does citywide significance mean, or what's the definition of that? And I'm assuming you mean significant to either the history or is it significant to the city of Boulder City, to the people of Boulder City, to the landscape or of Boulder City? I don't know. Or is it the significance of the person that it's memorializing or is a monument to?
I think that's the intent, is that they wanted to separate like a memorial to an individual. For example, we have memorials to individuals in our parks, park benches, and then you may have a memorial to an event that impacted the entire community, or you may have an individual who is recognized for their contributions to the community at large, and so that is the intent with citywide significance.
Again, it would be helpful to, I guess, define, categories of significance. Is it people? Is it events? Is it...
It does say it's determined by the city manager, so at that time, would they determine that?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's up to them, right?
Do you think it should be just up to the city manager to make that decision? Suppose he likes, green monuments, but the rest of the community wants blue monuments. I mean, I don't know. If there was if there's some way to categorize it. Or another example is if that person was here for a week, let's say, versus somebody who lived here their entire life. So what makes that person, quote unquote, significant? Is it how long they lived here, or what did they do, or I don't know. So those were all my comments.
And I agree with what Blair's saying, and in a more general sense, the thing that bothers me about this document is number one, the ambiguity of it. Number two, I really believe there should be a distinction in this document between monuments, however we categorize monuments, memorials, and statues, in parks within the historic district versus parks within the city in general, there should be a difference between a memorial of some place placed within a historic area of the city versus a memorial that is put in Veterans Memorial Park or wherever. So those are two things. The other thing is I'm nervous about the way that it is processed, because as I read this, the city manager has virtual control over what happens to any application for a monument or a memorial or whatever the terminology is we're going to use. I mean, there's verbiage in here that says, well, if the city manager thinks he should, he can call on one of the committees, the Planning Commission, the not mentioned, but the Historic Preservation Committee or the Parks and Recreation Committee. But I'm nervous, and again, this is me looking in the long term, okay? I mean, we don't know what kind of city manager we're going to have 50 years from now. We don't know what kind of city council we're going to have 50 years from now. And when I look at historic preservation or memorializing something, I look at the long term. And I don't think this document addresses the level of the level of interest that should be applied to any application that considers what's going to happen 20 years from now or 10 years from now. And I'm nervous about that. I mean, I think that needs to be thought through. And again, and Blair was the ambiguity of some of these citywide significance. Well, determined by the city manager. I'm not sure that I want any city manager to be the only one that determines citywide significance. You know, you understand my point. I don't want to belabor it, but I'm concerned about the ambiguity inherent in this thing, and I think, I mean, it's a nice start, and I appreciate it. It's probably taken a lot of work to do, but there are aspects of it that are, I think need to be reviewed some and worked on.
I have a question. Is this the only document of its kind, public document, administrative directive? Is this the only one in existence, or is this new?
When you say the only one, you mean the only administrative directive?
Yeah, I mean, is there another document like this, or is this the only one we have?
Yeah, there are other administrative directives that have been implemented over the years. This is the first one to be created for public monuments.
Okay, I have one comment. I think Blair and Charlie make a good point that maybe it should be included historic districts and regular districts, so that if it does go into the historic district, that would make it maybe, you know, something that they would have to think about a little differently than the regular district. For example, one of the parks is in the historic district, and some of the parks are not. So maybe that should be, you know, categorized. And also, maybe the city manager is a simple way to administrate it. I mean, it seems like they have to apply somewhere. So, I mean, where would they be applying? So if they apply to the city manager, that's just, like, that's where it starts, you know. That's what I'm thinking of in terms of simplicity of process. So that would be my comment about the city manager.
I do have a couple of specific things that I'm curious about. In under number 7, monuments of citywide significance, the project review committee, it identifies an internal administrative project review committee. Do we have an internal project review committee? And who's on it?
Yes.
Is that you and Susan or what?
No, many more people besides us.
All right.
So the project review committee is representatives from pretty much every department within the city.
Okay.
And any type of preliminary project proposals that are submitted go before this committee for initial review and feedback before formal entitlements, before building permit processes. It's a chance for a business owner, property owner, or developer to get some initial feedback from city staff.
I'm just curious about that. Is this project review committee bound by open meeting laws?
No, because it's just city staff.
Okay, which I've never quite
So
figured out.
basically, the application starts at the city manager, then it goes to the evaluation of that committee.
Correct.
So I think the city manager is just a place to start. You know, I don't see it as a negative thing at all.
But
It says as determined by.
some other, again, it is, again, here we're talking about, I'm looking at this, but there are other things that to me are just ambiguous. I'm looking at D1. Has the person, group, or event being memorialized made a significant enough contribution to merit a monument? Okay, well, is that money? Is that time? Is that labor? Is it hot dogs? What is it? What's a significant enough contribution? If I give you $20, if I give you 50,000, do I get a monument? Number 2, under that same thing, integrates with the surrounding environment. I have no idea what that means. How well the monument integrates with the surrounding environment. Well, if you have a 12-foot high statue, does that integrate with the surrounding environment? If there's a 2-foot statue next to it? Those kinds of things in here just bug me, I guess is as good a point as any.
Not explicit enough, it's too large of a.
Here's another, is the monument is related to the underlying purpose of the monument or the site in the park has been designated in a master plan or other approval of the city council as a particularly appropriate site for a proposed. Do we have a particularly appropriate site for a proposed monument? Has that ever been defined anywhere? So those are the things that bother me, Michael. I mean, I don't like to nitpick the thing, but I think this is a first attempt, and I think it's a valuable attempt, but I think it needs to be reworked with a little more specificity about certain things. I mean, I have no idea. Like Linda said, I mean, you got to start somewhere. You go to the city manager, you give the thing to the city manager, you give it to this administrative project review committee. I don't have any problem with that. You have to start somewhere. But I do think, though, that there ought to be a little bit better definition about what happens. We have the same problem with historic preservation. Now, I know you guys know this, and hopefully the new ordinance is going to address some of those issues, where there are things that go on within the building project within the historic district that the Historic Preservation Committee never sees because the code is so lax that, you know. So anyway, those are my concerns.
Can I, so based on that, what you've just brought up, I just want to clarify that the reason I bring up the impact to the historic district is there are parks and spaces that are historic, such as Wilbur Square and a number of other open spaces. So, and they are addressed in the National Register as being significant. They're not called out individually, and they haven't been inventoried, which is something, again, looking to the future, that's something perhaps we want to do an inventory of our landscape features, such as parks and roads and sidewalks and those types of things. So perhaps a suggestion, again, regarding my comment as well as Charlie's about defining significance, is perhaps the city needs to come up with a criteria for significance. Similar to the National Register, you determine, why is this place important? Or why is this building important? And is it because of a person? Is it because of, if it's a building, how it was constructed or what it looks like? And, when in time was that place important? So there's lots of examples, if you want to start there, to look in the National Register guidance for defining criteria for significance. And then the other thing, though, and Charlie when you went to section 7D3, impact on park use, is this directive just for parks, or is it for any space in Boulder City, open or not? Because there's a clock next to the hotel that's in a sense a memorial, or it commemorates an event, but that's not in a park. It's on a sidewalk. So,
Yeah, the intent is for the placement of monuments on city property. So that would be inclusive of more than just parks.
okay. So then this impact on park use, what about impact on any use instead of just park use? Again, for number 7D3, which is site in the park. So. Ray, did you have any comments?
Yes, I do. Thanks. So my comments would be that I think that the directive needs to have some language in there. I think a good place to have it would be under number 7, section C, Board and Commission review. And I think that it should be stated here or somewhere else in the directive that any monuments of citywide significance that are to be erected in the historic district will come before the Historic Preservation Committee for review. I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be in there, and the word historic is not mentioned anywhere in this directive. So I think that's a very simple statement right there, and there would be a level of review right there, and it's an appropriate level of review, especially when it relates to the historic district and the erection of a citywide significant monument. Who better than the Historic Preservation Committee to be involved in providing some recommendations to the council on these things? So that's all I wanted to add. I think we as a committee should ask for that.
And let me just add one more thing. There are already historic plaques and maybe monuments erected. There's the sundial in Sundial Park. I don't know if that's, I think it's a really early installed monument or memorial, not sure which. And then there's different plaques all over, like Wilbur Square. I think that was installed in like the 1940s or something like that. So what about, how do you treat historic or monuments or plaques that have become historic in and of themselves? So,
Well, wouldn't that be included in the overall scope of what the city owns?
I don't know.
Well, the intent with this is direction on the installation of new monuments.
Okay.
It doesn't contemplate ongoing maintenance or preservation of existing monuments.
Okay.
I don't have anything else. If you're looking, I just think it needs to go back to whoever, I don't know who wrote this, Michael. I don't know. I assume the staff did somehow, but I just think it needs to be reviewed and maybe tightened up a little bit.
Are we the only committee that this is going to go before?
No, the City Council has asked for Parks and Recreation Commission review as well.
Okay,
So in terms of next steps, we will take your feedback back to staff who prepared this. They'll collect the feedback from the Parks and Recreation Committee, and they'll represent to the City Council with all of that feedback.
okay. Is everybody happy with what they put in there? Did you want to add any? No, did you want to add anything while we're doing this? We might as well. I mean, go ahead.
If I have any more comments or suggestions, can I just send them to you?
Sure.
Okay, as far as examples that may be out there to assist.
Yeah, I don't know when they plan to go back to the City Council, but I suspect it wouldn't be until at least August.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So if anybody else has any comments that they want to write into the Development Department, then we just go right ahead. Because they need that input. It's valuable. Okay,
Thank you for your feedback.
sure. Okay, let's see. Now we're looking at agenda item 4 for possible action update on implementation of the committee's goals and priorities.
So as we do every month, this is an update to the matrix regarding the status on committee goals. And as you know, these goals mirror the goals that are contained within the City Council adopted Historic Preservation Plan. And you'll see highlighted in bold, the intent is to move forward with the proposed changes to the Historic Preservation Ordinance to the Planning Commission in August. Any questions?
We're moving right along. Staying right on the course. Okay,
Ray, did you have anything?
Yes,
Are you there?
yep.
Nothing
Can you hear me?
on agenda item 4?
No? Okay.
Ray, I don't know if there's anything you can possibly do on your end, but unfortunately, you're coming over really fuzzy, so.
Oh, let me try taking off the headset. Hold on.
How's that?
Much better.
Better? Is that better?
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Now I can't hear you though. But I'll get closer. Okay. No, I didn't have anything to add there. Thanks.
Okay, all right. So then we'll move on to number 5 for possible action, discussion on public outreach to promote historic preservation matters.
Committee members had asked that this item come back to them.
Yeah, right. We need to be reminded of this. So thank you very much. And I guess we're just still working on it. Ray, did you have
Yes.
a comment?
Just Ray here. Anyway, yeah, that project, I did put it on hold. Had too much going on. And, but I do intend to pick it up again and keep working on that. So, maybe by after the summer, we'll have something.
Okay, good.
Is there a certain meeting, if the committee isn't good, when do you want this item to return on the agenda? Because
Let's give it till September. How's that?
sounds good.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Madam Chair, before moving on to item 6, I've been in communication with Courtney Mooney.
Okay,
She is available to call in So if the committee is prepared, what we'll do is we'll have her call in and she can go through her presentation and answer committee questions.
All right, just fine. Thank you.
So if you can note that we're going back to agenda item 2.
Right, we are now going back to agenda item number 2 on page 10. Okay, the subject is for possible action, discussion with Northwind Resources Consulting, LLC, on potential changes to the adopted exterior design guidelines for various properties in the historic district. And it was our understanding that Courtney would update us.
Hi, you've reached Courtney at 702-858.
Hello, Courtney.
LLC on potential changes to the adopted exterior design guidelines for various properties in.
Courtney, can you turn down your computer?
Yes, I actually just closed that web page.
Okay,
Better,
good.
much better.
All right, if you want to proceed with your presentation, I'll just advance the slides on this end.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, committee. My apologies for being late this evening. I appreciate your patience. So we'll start with slide 2. Michael, the styles, the primary architecture styles.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so these are the primary architectural styles that were built within the period of significance of the district. There are, as we kind of mentioned at the last meeting, some sub-styles and some styles where there might just be one or two of that were also built within the period of significance. But these are kind of the main ones, and these are the main styles that you have your architectural design guidelines for already. And I just wanted to point this out as we move forward and start talking about some of the buildings that were built outside of the period of significance. Next slide, please, Michael. So, and as we presented a couple of meetings ago, I believe, we talked about the design standards for the contributing buildings. And once again, this is, we're just looking at content, not final design. This particular one is for the National Folk style. So we talk about, which properties are contributing. These are all the addresses that are National Folk and which ones are contributing. A little blurb about the style, the architectural context of the style, and what the local context for the style as well. And then we show an image of an individually eligible property of that style, and with arrows denoting the character-defining features of that particular style. We also have information about the information about the character-defining features in text, and then some streetscape features as well. So next slide, please, Michael. And I just would add very quickly that this is the content that the committee looked at, again, 2 or 3 meetings ago, and we wanted to move forward with that type of content. So at the last meeting, I talked about the design within context approach and how we were looking at kind of dividing up the district as much as we could into specific contextual areas. And I had the map that I showed you that needed to be further defined. So as we started getting into it, we asked our graphics folks to map out, for example, where all the different styles are, where all the different groups are. And group by group, I mean builders, 6 companies versus reclamation, et cetera. And I chose this section, I screenshot this section of the map showing the styles so that you could see how many styles there are even within a group. So you've got you've got quite a few styles that are kind of mixed into that area. And that's not specific just to this particular section of the district, but it is throughout the district, which kind of made it very difficult to create these contextual areas like we had envisioned that it would be easy to do. Because when we're talking about contextual design, we say, okay, so everybody on this street has to have a front-facing entrance because that's what that particular style had. But not all of them do have that. So it started to get very complicated. We had a lot of round and round with this particular, trying to figure out how to get define the contextual areas. So, and then of course there were all of these properties that were built out of the period of significance that are kind of, scattered throughout, which also made it difficult to really define an area. And it ended up being, just a few homes on a street would have a contextual area. So that got to be very, it was very congested. The map became very congested. So we decided that we're going to focus on the properties that are constructed within the period of significance, and the contributing ones will follow those prescriptive design guidelines that are in the previous slide, and then we will move on to the next slide, Michael. Thank you. And now we'll discuss the contextual design guidelines for the non-contributing buildings that were built within the period of significance. Now, the Secretary of the Interior Standards they publish like a model guideline for properties that were built, non-contributing properties, and also infill and new construction it's for infill and new construction for properties that are built outside of the period of significance and non-contributing properties that are built inside the period of significance. So for those properties, it would have to be a case-by-case basis, but we would review it based on these guidelines, which are, some of it has some overlap with the Secretary of the Interior Standards for rehabilitation, but this is specific to a district. So it's called new construction within the boundaries of historic properties, and this is edited for our purposes. Related new construction, including accessory buildings, driveways, parking lots, landscape improvements, and other features must not alter the character of the property or the district. The location or additions of new construction should be considered carefully in order to follow setbacks of the neighboring buildings and avoid, blocking the neighboring buildings. It should be placed away from or the side of buildings and must avoid obscuring, damaging, or destroying any remaining character-defining features of the building and district. And again, this goes back to style. So if you have in this instance here, a Spanish Revival, you can recognize, if you look at the Spanish Revival design guidelines, you'll know what character-defining features still remain on that building and which ones should be protected, and then where there can be some flexibility for some alterations. So protecting the historic setting and context of the district, including the degree of open space and building density, that must always be considered. And the massing, size, scale, and architectural features of new construction and additions should be compatible with the building. And this states, when visible from the street, additions must be subordinate to the historic building. New construction should be distinct from the old and should not replicate historic features found within the district. And then, of course, you want to maximize the advantage of existing site conditions, such as landscaped areas, drops in grade, etc. So next slide, please. So this is contextual design guidelines for non-contributing buildings built outside the period of significance. And again, we're using the same publication, but we pulled out the things that are specific to buildings that were built, outside of a period of significance. So there's a little bit more leniency. I think it's, and also these would be for, this would also be for, not just residential, commercial, residential, industrial, and public. And essentially, what we're hoping to do is kind of is sort of do no harm to the non-contributing buildings. We want to review each of these buildings within their own particular context. So, for example, with this building, it's obviously built in the 1950s, and you wouldn't want to review it as a building that was constructed during the period of significance. So again, a lot of this language is the same. I would point out that again, this would be for additions that are visible from the street, for contributing properties, and again, you're not demolishing any historic features. So next slide, please. So these are the standards that are pulled from the Secretary of the Interior standards, again, for new construction within the boundaries of historic properties. And we've pulled out the verbiage that's specific to this particular section. So related new construction, again, so some of it there's some overlap, but must not alter the historic character of the district as opposed to the building in the district, obviously. The location of new construction should be considered carefully. You have to protect the historic setting and context of the district, including the degree of open space and building density. That should always be considered when planning new construction. And so you also have to take into account neighboring buildings, lot size, setbacks, building height, streetscapes, etc. And in properties with multiple historic buildings, the historic relationship between the buildings must always be protected. So contributing buildings should not be isolated from one another by the insertion of a new building, if possible. And so we'll continue on with the next slide, Michael. As with new additions, the massing, size, scale, and architectural features of the new construction should be compatible, but obviously, should not mirror the other historic elements that are found within the district. It should be distinct from the old and not attempt to replicate historic buildings. You should have a limitation on the size, scale, and design of new construction. You want to, hopefully you can maximize the advantage of existing site conditions. And again, with this one, the historic landscapes and significant view sheds must also be preserved. And then it talks about archaeological resources. So if you're digging a new building, you probably will not run across a situation like this within the developed area, but it is something to be considered when you're digging new foundations. And then the last slide, Michael, is again a design review process that was presented at camp, and it's pretty similar. I showed this slide at the last meeting, but it just for a good reminder that the applicants would submit a completed application for a certificate of appropriateness to staff. Staff would then review for completeness, and they may schedule a pre-application conference with the applicant. Staff reviews the routine maintenance and minor work, and the committee would review large rehabilitation projects, new construction, infill, demolition, and anything else that would be specified in the ordinance. So I think the main difference, the main takeaway is that in looking at the variety of architecture and styles and building types within the district, our initial idea of creating these larger contextual areas could not be done. And so I tried to find language that could be, that would apply to the buildings that are either, non-contributors that are built within the period of significance, built without, outside of the period of significance, and infill. So it will be a bit of a case-by-case basis. But unfortunately, I think that's the only way that it can be done for those properties. And I'm open to questions.
Hi, Courtney. This is Blair. Thanks for,
Hi, Blair.
again, for all of this work. I had a question regarding the mapping. And the slide that you have with the layers of architectural style and then the small map. And then you have on the smaller map outlined in red.
Yeah.
And then you highlight, I believe, the properties within that red outline.
Yeah.
What is that area, that red area, or what did you think that was, like 6 companies or reclamation? I'm not sure.
You know, I can tell you in just a second here. They all, hold on, I can get that for you.
And I don't know if that necessarily matters, but you're highlighting that area, I'm assuming, based on the preponderance that the majority of the properties there were either built by like 6 companies or reclamation or whoever. And you were hoping that if they were, let's say, 6 companies, then those should all be the 6 company style or versions thereof. And I see though in the map, there are the different styles. And
Yeah.
I guess my question is though, I know that it would be difficult at such a large scale to add a context to that big chunk that's in the red, but could that context be narrowed down perhaps within the red area to sections, such as the one section of Denver? It looks like the majority of those properties are Spanish Revival.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be possible, granted you can't do an overall context for that, all those properties within the red zone, but could it be for that one street perhaps? Because there's a majority or preponderance of that style on that street. And the reason I'm saying that is this will play into the properties on Ash, Birch, and Cherry. And one of the character defining features of those homes are the continuum of the front lawn area.
Right.
And so I guess I'm a little concerned that if you can't apply a context to that area as a whole because of the landscaping, the historic landscape feature, what I'm saying is if you just concentrate on individually on the homes, let's say on Ash, Birch, or Cherry, rather than them as a whole on that street, will we lose the standards that apply to all of those properties on that street, on those streets?
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I apologize?
No. I'm thinking out loud, so I'm done.
No, that's okay. So just to let you know that there are, it looks like there are 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 different groups within that area that's red highlighted. So I don't think, because the language in the standards for infill within districts, it talks about, being compatible with your surrounding landscape and the street view shed and all of that. So I think that there is a way when you look at, if an application comes in for a property that's, say, non-contributing, right, the one that's shown in slide 5, let's say, it's non-contributing because it has the addition on the side, and I believe the windows have been replaced. And I'd have to look at the specific RF form. But when you look at this building, let's say they want to, add a front porch, like an enclosed front porch or something like that. So they would have to, they would have to meet the context of that particular style. So we're not looking at all of the styles on the street. You would be looking at, what is common on the street, yes, with the landscaping and with the setbacks, obviously, and the massing on the street. Maybe not specific specific architectural elements that are, specific to Spanish Revival, but you would look at it and you would say, okay, it looks like the roof tile is original, so we don't want your addition to ruin that. You've got this, cross-gabled roof, so maybe we don't want you to, put a hipped roof on. So you are looking at all the buildings that are on the street, and you're looking at the consistency of the parkway, is what I think you were specifically talking about. The view shed on the street and all of those things, and that's all in that language. So you would have to be compatible with whatever is going on along that whole street, without having to define these very kind of small sections within the district, like, 3 or 4 clumps of houses or, that are a particular style or builder, because that's what you would have if we did it that way. It's just very congested. So this way you're looking at the house and what style it was. You're looking at, the main components of the street. You're looking at, what's left that is an original element, and can that be preserved? And then, how they could be compatible with all of the buildings on the street.
I think, okay, and I see that. I was just wondering how you would convey that to the public, but I see on your slide 3, there's the streetscape standards for residential properties. So that's where people would see
Right.
how their property compares to the other properties within their street or area. Okay, got it. And so you would be coming up with, let's say, design standards for contributing buildings that include streetscape standards.
Correct.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think the parkway specifically is so important, and it's really prolific throughout the district, as well as the tree cover and all of those, as you've mentioned, that one of your favorite things are the stone retaining walls, and those are, that would be something that would be included in. You would have to evaluate that if you're putting in a new building. You would not be able to just not have that stone wall. I wouldn't recommend that the stone wall be replicated if it's missing. If somebody's already removed it, you would put something that was similar and indistinguishable. But I think you could do something that was compatible.
Awesome. So will you then be doing an inventory of streetscape features or features that contribute to streetscapes, streets, roads, those kinds of things? I don't mean a full inventory and evaluation for the National Register, but I guess at the local level, like kind of a inventory for the purpose of creating design standards.
No, we're not going to. The only thing that we have in design standards right now for the contributing in terms of landscape is, if there is a parkway, you need to maintain it. You need to keep that parkway. But we're not doing an inventory so much as we're suggesting that as applications come in, then the streetscape is evaluated at that time. So you would have, they would need to look at what their neighbors have. We need to, if it's been on the street forever, it's probably, if you've got a parkway there, especially if you have the stone retaining wall, that's within the period of significance. So, you're going to have to evaluate the streetscape with each application. But we would have a graphic showing like what are those things that need to be looked for. So in lieu of doing an inventory, we would say, look for a parkway, look for setbacks, look for, continuity with sidewalks or driveways or whatever it is.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ray,
Did you have anything, Charlie? Did you have anything, Charlie? Okay.
No, I'd just like to say, Courtney, I'm very happy with the way things are going. Very impressed, and I'm looking forward to more.
Oh, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, obviously the intent with Courtney's presentation is to make sure she's continuing to move forward in the right direction with the development of these design guidelines. And I think just to reiterate for the public and the conversations the committee has had thus far, we really see the design guidelines looking at 4 different categories of structures within the historic district. The first is the contributing properties that were built during the period of significance, and that's part of the reason why they're contributing properties, and that the greatest level of standards apply to those properties because they are contributing properties. And so you saw Courtney's slide, which kind of laid out in concept how that would look. Then you have the second group of properties, which are buildings that were built during the period of significance, but because there have been so many changes made to those properties, they're no longer contributing. There, the standards would not be as strict, and it would be more contextual. Certainly, with the Preservation Residential Grant, one of our goals is to work with those property owners to try to bring them from non-contributing back to contributing, but the standards that apply to them are different than the contributing. Then you have the properties that were constructed outside the period of significance, and Courtney kind of described how those would be reviewed. And then the final group is infill development, new construction within the historic district, and what standards would apply to that. So we just wanted to kind of reiterate that that's the 4 areas of focus, and with your feedback, Courtney will continue to work on the design guidelines as has been discussed.
Okay. Well, Courtney, you're making progress, and we appreciate it. It's very finely tuned, I know, but it needs to be this way, and we appreciate your expertise in this area.
Thank you so much. I know it seems like it's taking a while, but I feel like we're really starting to get close to the end of the discovery phase.
Yeah. Well, thank you very
we can
much.
really start applying what we've come up with and what we've discussed in the meetings.
And Courtney, this is Charlie. I just want to say that I concur. I think you're on the right track. You're doing good. I don't understand half of it, but that's
Like I said, it's finely tuned, and
you're doing good.
we get more understanding as we work with you, so it becomes clearer. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Courtney.
Thanks, Michael.
All right. Now we're moving on to thank you, committee, for going back to number 2. Now we're back on number 6. For possible action, discussion update on the status of properties in the historic district and other potentially eligible properties. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
What's going on with the retaining walls for Denver Street?
Exactly. I was just looking at the picture.
It's a vacant lot. The house permit was issued a couple months ago, so that was reported to you previously. And basically, that Denver Street extension goes up a hill. It's a private odd road, and they need to build retaining walls just to level the site.
Okay. Thanks.
I have another question, and I thought I had a picture of it, so I'd have the address. But if you turn on Birch, off of Nevada Way onto Birch, the very first house there on the right has significant work done on the property, on the lawns all torn up, and there are blocks like they're going to build a retaining wall and so on. And it looks like they've changed a window. I was just curious what's going on with that, because that's a Birch Street property that I don't know which one of these. I don't know whether they have a building permit, then the building permit, the guidelines don't apply or whatever. But they're doing a lot of work on that house, on the property anyway. I don't know about the house specifically, but I thought I took a picture of it. So
I think I know what you're referring to with respect to that address, and I've asked our building official to contact the property owner because those walls do not have a permit with the city.
Well, I was curious about that, and like I said, that's one of the iconic streets that. So anyway.
Okay. All right, then moving on to agenda item number 7, committee discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Committee meetings. I did have one comment, and I don't know if I'm within the realm, so you'll have to tell me if I am or not. I have been a little concerned about the Bullock Airport building that the city owns. I think it needs painting and some landscaping, maybe some very simple landscaping around it. Is there a way that we can fold that into the budget somehow, or how do we do that?
Well, the city council just approved the fiscal year 23 budget last month.
Okay.
And so that has been adopted, and that's what the city's moving forward with. I can certainly convey your comments to the Public Works Department regarding the existing maintenance of the building.
Okay, that'd be great. Can you report back to us on what they say? I mean, if we can't do it this year, maybe they can do it next year with the other budget.
We might point out that building is not in the historic district.
Correct.
And we are the Historic Preservation
Well,
Committee.
yeah, but it's part of the, part of our jurisdiction.
No, it's not part of our
No.
jurisdiction.
Oh, it's not? Oh, okay.
Not officially
I
yet.
am wrong then. I thought it was.
No, the Bullock Field, that proposed historic district,
It
we'd
hasn't
have,
materialized yet.
correct.
Okay.
So in the draft ordinance that's going to be considered by the Planning Commission and eventually going back to the City Council, there are provisions in there that talk about the designation process and for designation of new historic districts.
Okay, then that'll be more appropriate at that time than under a new district then.
I would say, though, that our current code allows for us to nominate properties to either the local, state, or national register. So there was a lot of work done, a lot of background and research done on that, and it would be worth revisiting that and figure out why it kind of dropped by the wayside. There was something we were waiting on.
As I recall, I think what happened was we had gone down that pathway and did a lot of work, but then the city manager at that time thought we should go with the certified local government status. So that's when we changed our direction and went with CLG status.
That has nothing to do with nominating a property to the national or to a register. My understanding that
Yeah.
there may be a
Yeah,
portion of that, but I think the problem is that we were considering adding the terminal building, which is private property, and we didn't get positive feedback from the owners of that property to move forward. So then it just kind of dropped. And I think the thing we have to do is just remove that from the site plan and move forward with just the hangar and other features. That was my understanding.
So, since this agenda item is for future
Yeah.
agenda topics, how about we would just bring back the background history of that at a future meeting?
Okay, that sounds good. And
I
then
think we
go
could,
from there.
Blair's right. I mean, the existing ordinance does allow us to nominate a building, and if not for the National Register, the local register. So I think, yeah, we could revisit that process. No reason we can't.
Okay, then let's do it. That'll be great. All right, thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to public comment. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak at the discretion of the chair. Comments made during the public comment period of the agenda may be on any subject. All remarks shall be addressed to the Historic Preservation Committee as a whole, not to any individual member of the Historic Preservation Committee, of the audience, or of the city staff. No person other than members of the Historic Preservation Committee and the person who has the floor shall be permitted to enter into any discussion either directly or through a member of the Historic Preservation Committee without the permission of the chair or the presiding officer. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this item. Okay, so we're open again for public comment. And let's see. Your telephone number to call in is 702-293-9208.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's up there. Or this is different. All right, sorry, folks. The committee comment period is open, and you can call at 702-589-9629. Okay.
See if that lady stayed around long.
Yeah.
I'm curious what she looked at. No, that was my wife.
Okay.
She's not calling me. Shoot.
Public comment, if you could state your name for the record and then go ahead.
Fine. My name is Gail Motley. I was just wanting to talk to the committee about a piece of history in Boulder City that's on Arizona Street that is dying. The arborvitae trees, I believe, were planted when the Thailand site was being built or shortly thereafter. I don't have a history on it. I moved here in the 70s, and the ones near Nevada Way were already gone. I never thought to ask Rose Lawson, who was our babysitter, and her husband was a high scaler. Elton and Teddy and Bill Harbor, they were all my friends, but I never asked them about the arborvitae trees. And now that I'm noticing that they're dying, I'm very interested. From Nevada Highway on Arizona Street, there are probably 50 arborvitaes. The farther east you go, the worse shape they're in. And I drove around, I made some notes after I drove around a couple of times, and I will just read you my notes. If you start at the dentist office on Arizona Street by Brett Runyon's Desert Sun Realty and go east, you'll see them all, and they're all in different degrees of care. The ones by City Hall are in excellent shape. The ones in front of the Parks and Rec Center are in good shape. I think they need some fertilizer. The ones in front of the Masonic Temple, one is in excellent shape. It's beautiful. The others are in fair shape. They're getting water, but no fertilizer, no care. But the 5 in front of the Senior Center are dying, along with the nice olive trees on the side of the Senior Center are also dying. There's a drip system there on the trees, but the water has been shut off to these. The dirt around the trees are like concrete. They also crowned the dirt around these trees, so even if the drip system worked, it would go into the gutter. These trees are getting absolutely no care at all, and I believe that they will probably die by the end of the year. The trees in front of St. Christopher's Church are getting water, I think, but they look like they're also dying. There's a lot of dead up in the crown of the trees, which means lack of water, fertilizer. There's quite a few in front of the church. And then where Arizona goes into Utah Street, if you make a hard right onto Avenue H, which is the back of the New Life building and the courthouse, there's about a dozen trees there that are dying. No care at all, except one by the courthouse, and I think it's just getting water. In fact, all the trees around the New Life building are dying. The city used to use a water truck to water those little mulberry trees, but I haven't seen that in a long time. And that whole place, it looks bad. I own the Elton Garrett's original Boulder City newspaper office, and in that yard is a beautiful arborvitae that either he or someone in his office planted probably around 1932, 1933. They're very old. It's in very good condition, except the sitter workers came along one day and cut a huge amount out of the tree that was facing the alley. And I say this with very deep conviction. Please don't let the city cut down these uncared for trees. Many times the city's answer to fix a tree is to cut it down and just remove it. And that would be a horrible fate for these 90-year-old historic trees. They stay green all year. They're not deciduous. They don't shed. When healthy, they look like a pretty cedar tree, and they don't take a lot of care, but they need some care. And I was thinking there are several master gardeners in Boulder City. My cousin is one of them. I'm sure they would be glad to help save these trees, and they would know exactly what's needed. And I don't think the city of Boulder City has a master gardener on payroll, from what I've seen. Finally, to say that I don't think the trees in front of the senior center on H will be alive another year without water and maybe some slow-release fertilizer. I believe the city thinks the people that have the buildings are taking care of them, and I think the people that have the buildings think the city's taking care of these trees, and neither is the case. You can call me if you have any questions about what I've seen and what I know about the city after living here almost 50 years. And my number's in the book, and I'm really not hard to find. Everybody knows me. Thank you so much.
Gail, could you spell the name of that tree for us?
Oh, it's an arborvitae tree. I'd have to get a book out to look it up. It's arborvitae, and it doesn't have leaves per se. They have what's a placket or a platelet, and it's very, very compact. I can look that up for you, Linda, and let you know what it is. It's a long name, but they're all over town. I have some along my driveway that were planted in the 70s before I even bought this house, and they're over 50 years old, and I keep them trimmed, and they're beautiful. They're a great windbreak. The birds love them. They're protected in there. But these trees that are on Arizona Street, like I said, I think at one time they went all the way to Nevada Way, and for some reason they were taken out and hardwoods have been put in down around the theater and the pasty restaurant and all that. They're all gone. But on the east side, they're in horrific shape. I don't know what's going on with the senior center. I tried to ask the receptionist one time why the trees were dying in front, and I did not get a good answer. So I thought I would approach the Historic Preservation Committee because these are historical trees, and they do need to be saved. They are part of the history of Boulder City. I wish I would have asked Teddy Fenton or Elton about how this came about, who planted them, and what was the overall design, and I never thought to ask them while they were here. So I feel badly about not pursuing that. I did talk to them about a lot of things, but not about those trees because at the time when they were alive, they were in good shape. And now they are not in good shape, and it's just a shame. I don't understand what's going on, but the dirt around those trees at the senior center truly is like concrete. It has to be carefully taken out and leveled off so water will actually go down to the trees. They don't need a lot of water. a couple of times a week in the summertime to deep water, and compared to what's being put on the golf courses and the cemeteries, it would literally be a drop in the bucket to keep all these trees looking very, very good. And like I said, master gardeners are probably brighter than me about plants. I've learned just by living here what we have to have. If anybody's gone by my house or my rentals, they're green, they look good, they don't look like rental houses. I maintain them, and my renters love the properties. They don't mind a little water bill if they're having beautiful trees and flowers. So if there's anything I can do, I will look that up, Linda, and give you a call on the exact spelling of it. But it's called arborvitae,
okay.
and
Blair
there's a
just
lot of
gave
them
me
in
the
town, but not that
exact
size,
spelling.
not like what's on Arizona Street. Those are monsters. They're beautiful.
Okay, Mr. Mays, is there anything we can do, or, because I don't know if it's out of our,
Not under public comment.
okay. So what should I do?
Thank you for
Okay.
your comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Gail, for your comments. Thank you for calling in. Okay. Okay, so we did have some public comment, and we appreciate that. And for all practical purposes, this meeting is adjourned.